Well, I know we're in the middle of a successful series when I hear from all of you. Let me tell you, I'm getting stories and quotes and ideas and suggestions because relationships are the school of life, right? I mean, today is part 2 in our series, Relationships, the Missing Manual. And what I know is that relationships are graduate school. It's where we are all growing our souls and learning the lessons that we are here to learn. So one of the quotes that I received this week, which I just love, listen to this one. We are all a little weird. And life's a little weird. And when we find someone whose weirdness is compatible with our own, we join up with them and fall into mutual weirdness and call it love. That's Dr. Seuss, by the way. Well, weird is one way to put it. Unique is another way to put it. You know, last week, I want to kind of catch everybody up. Last week, we talked about Reverend Andy Stanley of the church in Atlanta, the North Point Community Church there, and he speaks about the right person myth. And we said that one of the challenges in our primary relationships is that we have this right person myth, that when we find the right person, everything's going to be all right. And it does, if you're single, it looks like when we find the right person, everything's going to be all right. And if you're married, it looks like if I'd only found the right person, everything would be all right. And the way the myth works is it doesn't matter how much baggage we might have. We just think that once we find that right person, it's going to instantly evaporate, right? It's just going to go away. So if we're prone to moodiness, no problem. When we find the right person, we'll suddenly be blissfully happy all the time. If we are not disciplined in our finances and have a tendency to be in debt, no problem. When we find the right person, we'll suddenly just manifest discipline in every area of our life. And on it goes. We believe, and society fuels this myth, right? Society fuels this myth because in every romantic comedy, they find the right person and they get together. Now, how is it that we said last week that single people know when they found the right person? Chemistry, you're right. Chemistry, passion, stomach flutters. You know, that feeling that you just know that you know that you know that nobody else has ever had before. Nobody else has ever felt so passionate. Nobody else has ever had so much love for someone. And so, because of that, it must be the right person. There's so much chemistry. And just like all the movies, right? There's so much chemistry in those movies. And no matter, they seem absolutely, right? In the love stories, they seem absolutely misfit for one another. But somehow there's enough chemistry that they come together in the end. That's the right person myth. We know that when we find the right person, everything's going to be all right. Now, the interesting thing is that once you have found that right person and you end up in a committed relationship, you go ahead and decide to get married, and then it doesn't take too long before the chemistry, well, it begins to wane. And then you think you didn't find the right person. That's the problem. And it's really just a natural trajectory of relationships, that new challenges emerge, but you get scared. Now, one of the questions that Andy Stanley asks is this, and this is a painful question to hear, but I'm going to tell it to you again this week. You see, most of us have a long list of qualities that we're looking for in this right person, right? This long list of qualities. You gave some very profound ones last week, if you remember. Compassion and loving and healthy and spiritual and single, somebody said. Yes. And we all agreed that was a very important one for the right person that you're looking for. So there's this whole list of qualities that we're hoping to find in this right person. And Andy Stanley asked this question. So, this person that you're imagining, are you the person that the person you are looking for is looking for? Are you the person that the person you are looking for is looking for? And what this question does is it puts all the responsibility squarely back on us, on you, on me. Because this person with this long list of wonderful qualifications, they're going to be attracted to a certain level of consciousness, a certain level of beingness. So we are called into the opportunity to be the person that the person we are looking for is looking for. To be that. And Andy Stanley even says, take a year off of dating. If you're single, take a year off of dating and work on becoming this person that will attract the person that you are seeking. And I always got to give the caveat, because you're perfect just as you are. You are as God created you. You are whole and complete just as you are. And yet we all are in this state of becoming. We're always becoming more. And the intentionality shift is, instead of just intending that you're going to find the right person, putting all your efforts in finding that person, the effort shifts to within. And it's about being the right person, being the person that the person you're looking for is looking for. And in that place of beingness is your power. Your point of power is always within you in this now moment. It's not in the other person. Now, that brings us to the title of today's lesson, which is It's All About You. Because it always is all about you. Don't you know that's the truth? It's always about you. We think that the other person is going to make us happy. That's the right person myth. You know, what is it that whenever you read the advice columnists, whenever you read Dear Abby, somebody writes in and says they're having relationship troubles and they know counseling would be a good thing, but their partner won't go. And what does Abby say? She says, you go anyway. You go. Because it starts in here. It starts with working on ourselves, right? So last week, I gave you a little bit of a teaser. And I told you that this week I was going to share with you something that I felt was very important in the success of my husband's and my marriage. And Andy Stanley recommends this too. You might remember that last year, on the occasion of our 29th wedding anniversary, Brian stood up and gave a beautiful, beautiful tribute and this lovely and surprising sentiment that he expressed. But you'll also remember that on the occasion of our 29th anniversary, he stood up and said that we had had 28 years of wedded bliss. Now, you can do the math, and you can spread out those 12 months however you want to over the course of the 3 decades that we have now been married. But we've had our challenges, like every relationship. Every relationship has challenges, and that's how you grow and you move through them. So I want to share with you what I believe has contributed from my perspective to the longevity of our relationship. And it is what Andy Stanley recommends for absolutely everyone. Andy Stanley recommends for absolutely everyone that you clean up your childhood stuff. You clean up the baggage from your relationship with your parents and any other childhood stuff that you carry with you, because we might think that finding the right person is going to automatically shed us of this baggage, but you know what? We just cart it around with us everywhere we go, and we cart it right into the relationship. We cart it right into the relationship. There is a well-known therapist and author by the name of Harville Hendricks who's written this book, Getting the Love You Want, a guide for couples. And he has a theory, after having seen hundreds of couples and counsels with them, he formed this theory that is about what he calls the imago. And he says that part of this won't surprise you and part of this will. He says that we tend to be attracted to mates, to partners, who demonstrate qualities that our parents had. Now, that might not surprise you. You might think, my father had this wonderful sweetness to him, and I really always wanted to marry somebody that had that same sweetness. But what he goes on to say is that, yes, indeed, our partners often, if you did a list of qualities, you'd see that they match our parents' qualities, but not just the positive ones, the negative ones as well. In fact, there tends to be a closer match between the negative qualities of our mother or our father and our partner. He says that's because we are drawn to people who will have those same negative qualities so that we can work it out, so that we can heal it, so that we can heal the wounds that we have carried with us from that time, the wounds that we developed with our parents. And I got to stop and say, all parents mean well and are doing the best that they can do. And yet we as parents make mistakes. We all have qualities that are more positive and some that are more negative. And through that, innocently, wounds unfold in the lives of children, and those children grow up to be adults. And so when they get into relationship, So often what happens is it's my wounded child dealing with your wounded child. It's not me and you, it's my wounded child and your wounded child trying to have an adult relationship. Unless we've done the work we need to do to heal those wounds, or at least move into awareness about them. I'm not sure that we ever completely heal them, but we move into greater and greater awareness. And this is not just affecting your significant other relationships. The stuff you bring with you affects every relationship you have with your friends and your bosses and your coworkers and your neighbors. And so, let me give you an example about how this plays out, or played out a little bit in my relationship with my husband. You see, my father was a wonderful man. He had many strong qualities. Many of those I'm pleased to say that I believe I demonstrate. And he had also some not so good qualities, or qualities that were difficult for me, being the sensitive child that I was. So my dad had a temper, and he would get frustrated when things didn't go as he planned. He would try hard and things would fall apart, and then his anger would well up, and it would come out in really, really difficult ways. And so for me as a sensitive child, I had a fear and a heightened sensitivity around anger. So I remember when Brian and I were just dating, hadn't even been dating all that long, and we both worked in the same office building. And we were leaving from work one night, and I was in my car, or getting into my car, and he was in his, and he drove, at that time, a long Tornado. They don't even make cars that long anymore, but back then, this was the car you wanted to have. It was this beautiful car. He was so proud of it, and in our parking garage, there were these great big cement posts. Yeah, you know where this is going. So I'm getting into my car, but I'm also watching him. And he, meanwhile, I'm sure is distracted by what could only be described as my great beauty, I'm sure. And so he backs out of that parking space, with this big grin on his face. He backs right out and whoom, wraps right around one of those poles. Now, little Patty came out. I looked at that and I thought, oh no. He's going to be furious. I had no idea what to expect, but I expected he would be like my father. So Brian gets out of the car and he walks around, he looks at it, looks up and starts to laugh. I'm telling you, he just laughed. And in that moment, it's like my whole worldview shifted, and I just fell in love with him in that moment. I thought, here it's possible that a man can make such a, quote, mistake and just laugh at it. Okay, so that was when we were dating. Now fast forward, because I hadn't done my work yet at that point, and I still carrying with me this expectation about how it is that men are supposed to be angry and such. And I remember one time, once we were married, Brian and I were in this discussion. It was a serious discussion about something, I don't know what. But I was expecting him to be angry. And he wasn't. But I was expecting it. I was anticipating it. And so he finally looked at me. He got it. He looked at me and he said, Patricia, I'm not your father. And it's like, all of a sudden, the paradigm began to break away a little bit more. Of course, I knew that. I was placing unrealistic expectations on him, which fortunately were not true, but I was placing them on him. So what happens in our relationships is that we have these expectations, or often we marry these expectations. Before Brian, I dated another person who really was my dad and had all that temper. Fortunately, I married Brian and not the other person, right? But we tend to be attracted to people who will manifest these qualities so we can work it out. So I have, as you've heard me say many times before, I think it's very important to work on your stuff, to work on your childhood stuff. Many of you have done that in your life and are in the midst of going at it again. Sometimes we have to go at it more than once. I've had powerful therapy relationships in my life which have helped me not get rid of, but alleviate some of that baggage that I carried with me. And the other thing that I did, which was enormously helpful to me and increased my capacity to love my husband even more, is I attended something called the Hoffman Institute. You may remember me speaking about it. The Hoffman Institute is this 8-day program of intense work to heal your relationship with your mother and your father, to help you be more unconditionally loving toward others and toward yourselves. And I just have to say here that it's not about saying we had bad parents. We may have had wonderful parents, the best meaning parents in the world. Step in it sometimes and don't realize what's going on. That's just the way it is. Kids have wounds, and they grow up to be adults who have wounds as well. And so I'm encouraging you, if you haven't, Andy Stanley says, start doing your work. If you're single, do your work now before you get in the middle of a marriage. Do your work now. And if you're in the middle of a marriage, go back at it again. We have at the church, I always like to remind you that we have a team of spiritual counselors who are credentialed therapists who attend this church and love unity so much that they're willing to share their talents for 3 sessions. You can see them for 3 sessions just on a love offering. And if you choose to continue, then they'll certainly help you to negotiate a fee that would work. So we can refer you to counselors if that's something. If you're ready to begin today on that journey, we're willing to help you to do that. Or if you're desiring to go back at it, we're willing to help you go back at it again. I believe that, poor Brian, bless his heart, he had a lot to contend with me. He has a little less to contend with today. I can't say a whole lot less, but he has a little less. I want to share with you how it is that Andy Stanley put it, because I just love it. He said, if you attempt to build intimacy before you have done the hard work of becoming a whole and healthy person, every relationship will be an attempt to complete the hole in your heart. Let me say that again. If you attempt to build intimacy before you have done the hard work of becoming a whole and healthy person, every relationship will be an attempt to complete the hole in your heart. Every relationship will have a hole in it if you have unresolved drama with your parents. It goes straight to your spouse. If you have unresolved drama with your parents, it goes straight to your spouse, and the spouse can't win. The spouse can't win. Now, the right person myth thinks it's all about them to begin with. They think it's all about the spouse. But here's the key. It's really about us doing our work. And I want you to know it is never too late. It is never too late. I am so excited to share with you a story I have permission to share from a friend of mine. Her mother is 81 and sadly just placed her husband in a care facility for Alzheimer patients. It was necessary. She could no longer care for him at home. And now at 81, my friend's mother is waking up to herself. She's waking up to some of the anger that was in their relationship. She's waking up to some of the dysfunction that was in their family. And she's waking up to herself. And she has sought out a therapist for the first time in her life. And she has now been, after only 3 sessions, she began having crucial conversations with her daughters and her grandchildren. She's opening up dialogue that wasn't able to be there before. And not only that, but she has extended the offer to her daughters and her grandchildren that any of them who want to see this therapist, she will pay for their visits. And so my friend is looking forward to the opportunity to see the therapist, but also the opportunity to have a session with her sister. The dysfunction, and it carries throughout the family. And so just think for a moment about this woman who's 81 years old. This is the greatest gift that anyone could ever give their family. She is waking up, and she's giving that gift to her children before she ultimately moves on. She's very healthy. She's going to be around a long time. She's got many more years yet to celebrate her own awakening and to share that with her children. Isn't that beautiful? So it is never too late. It is never too late. Now, last week, we started our prescription for how it is that you can be that person that the person you were looking for is looking for. And we found the prescription in the book of 1 Corinthians, right? We found in that beautiful passage, that beautiful passage at the beginning of chapter 13, the first 8 verses. And you remember last week we talked about love is patient and love is kind, and we talked about all of that. Well, today I'm going to pick up where we left off. And so we're told in this passage that love keeps no record of wrongs. Now, let's just think for a minute. Does anybody here have kind of a running list in your mind of all the things that your spouse or your partner has done wrong? No, I know none of you would, but just in case you did. It may not be written anywhere, but it's the kind of list that comes up when the straw that breaks the camel's back breaks the camel's back. Everything's fine, you're biting your tongue, and then all of a sudden you just throw up all over your partner, right? They do one thing too many, and it's like, whoom. Now, I wouldn't know anything about this because my husband would never do anything to trouble me. You can imagine Brian wouldn't, but nevertheless, I might think there's a list, right? So, and here's the thing about it. It just comes out. And not to say it. I find myself saying, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. Phew, then I say it. Does that ever happen to you? You're biting a hole in your tongue. You're not supposed to say it, but you do. People are not looking at their spouses right now. They are looking straight ahead at me. It is the funniest thing. These people are sitting arm in arm, and they are not looking next to each other. Not looking to each other. So love, real love, unconditional love, keeps no record of wrongs. It's always looking for the highest and best in the spouse. Now, how do you do that? That sounds like a lofty goal. How do you do that? Well, one way is to take a class that we offer here periodically called nonviolent communication. It teaches you that sounds even harsher than it is. It teaches you how to convey your needs and your wants in a way that is loving, without harsh words or accusatory language. Nonviolent communication. If you ever see that class offered, it's a great one. And I want to also share with you an experience I had just last week with this little 9-year-old girl that came, and we had a sleepover last Friday night. Brian was gone, so this little girl came over and spent the night with me. And as we got ready for bed, part of her nighttime routine is to do what she calls forgivenesses and gratitudes. Her parents have taught her to clear every day. So every night before she goes to sleep, she does a list of forgivenesses. She forgives herself. She had a couple of things she thought she didn't do very well that day, and she said, I forgive myself for this and for that. And then, I joined in, started forgiving myself and forgiving other people and so forth. It's a daily cleansing process. That will keep you from keeping that running list of wrongs, right? At the end of each day, you clear it. And as you clear it, you'll be open to guidance if there's a conversation to have with your partner. So love keeps no record of wrongs. Here's another one. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Or rejoices in the right, some translations say. Now, you're probably thinking, well, what do you mean does not delight in evil? I would never do anything but speak highly of my partner. I would never delight in evil. But what if, just hypothetically, what if you've been telling your partner to take care of something, and you've told them once, and you've told them twice, and you've told them 3 times, and guess what? It comes back to bite them. Whatever it is, and you just want to say, I told you so. I told you so. Now, you don't say it, but you think it. So, and there's a little part of you that takes this little insidious joy in the fact that, they didn't do what they were supposed to do, and now they're getting their comeuppance, right? That's what we're talking about when we say that love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth or rejoices in the right. It's also about being truthful. Let me share with you this quote by Italian author Pietro Aretino. This is so powerful. He said, I love you, and because I love you, I would sooner have you hate me for telling you the truth than adore me for telling you lies. I'd sooner have you hate me for telling you the truth than adore me for telling you lies. Now, again, nonviolent communication class will help you learn how to speak the truth with love, how to speak your truth with love. It's so important in relationships. And I want to tell you that a woman shared with me after the last service that round about this time in the lesson, she got it. She and her husband had a little spat in the morning before they left, and they weren't able to patch it up before she headed off to church. So in the middle of the service, she pulled out her smartphone and texted to him. And she said, Patricia just said, clean up your childhood stuff. And I realized it's my childhood stuff that contributed to me doing yada, yada, yada. And then he texted her back. And I want you to know that I have no problem with your texting in the service. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with your tweeting all the wonderfully wise things that you hear from the ministers. And I certainly have no problem with your reconciling a relationship. You just pull out your phones and start at it right now. We're going to go on, but you feel free. You feel free. Love always trusts and hopes. Love always trusts and hopes. Love expects the best of the partner. You know, earlier we said our core value is love, and we express unconditional love, an inner quality that sees good everywhere and in everyone. Well, real love trusts your partner. It trusts your friends. It trusts them. It sees the highest and best in them. It expects them to show up. It anticipates positively for them. Because when you anticipate positively, when you see the good in them, then they rise to that. It's a vibrational thing. It's a match that's being made when that happens. And so it's trusting in them, and it's hoping. It's always maintaining hope. And then our scripture tells us that love always perseveres. It always endures. Another way to put that is that real love is a commitment. It's a commitment. And that means that it's a commitment that when things get tough, you stay with it. It's a commitment that means when things get tough, even if your partner isn't open to making the phone call and going with you for counseling, that you do it for yourself. That's commitment. Love perseveres. It perseveres through the tough times. And I believe that love also is wise enough to know when you've persevered enough, when it's time to leave. And there are times when it's appropriate to leave. But if you start with commitment, you're more likely to push through those difficult times when you think, oh, I should have married the right person. I did marry the right person. But a commitment will see you through that, to the possibility of healing, all that imago stuff that might be there, or whatever it might be. And I will say to you that I was a little girl who wished her parents would separate. It's not my place today to say whether they should have or they shouldn't have, but they clearly weren't happy together. And as a 9-year-old, I remember having this hope that they would part. So I know that there are times when that's the right decision to make. And love is able to discern. Love takes all these qualities from this passage in the 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and weaves them together and calls them forward. Andy Stanley says, read that passage before you go on every date. And a man came, visited with me downstairs at fellowship time after the first service and said, he has those words hanging right above his bed. They are so important to him that he lived from that place of love. He sees it every day. Every day. You see, love it really is an action word. We have to take action. That's what this series is about. It's about taking action. And you're going to hear something in particular that maybe you didn't quite want to pull out your cell phone to start texting an email or sending an email. But maybe today there's an opportunity for you to begin in a new way being the person that you want to be. I want to share with you that relationships are the graduate school of life. They are here for us to grow. They are here for our soul growth. And Tom Robbins, you know that Abraham writers perhaps, Esther and Jerry Hicks. Well, they had this to say about relationships. They said, you will never find yourself in a point in time when the subject of relationships is not an active part of your now experience. I mean, folks, relationships are it. This is how we learn and grow. They go on to say, for everything you perceive or notice or know is because of your relationship with something else or someone else. Therefore, it is accurate to say that without relationships, you could not exist at all. So relationships are about taking action, about stepping out and being willing to be bold, to be vulnerable, to realize that if you're willing to do the work, oh my, the results, the growth in you, the richness of your relationships. You see, your relationships will become the true demonstration of sacred love that you are and always have been. You just step out there in boldness and in faith. And as you do, you will come to know that you are today and always have been and always will be nothing but love. It's who you are.